Welcome to the Shower Epiphanies podcast, where we explore your hidden thoughts and desires, revealing your greatest drop the mic moments. Now, here's your host, Art Costello.
Welcome to the Shower Epiphanies podcast. Today, I am not only thrilled, but honored to have somebody I have a great deal of admiration for in the work he does. Richard Villasana is an incredible founder of Forever Homes for Foster Kids. And for those of you who know me, you know that that is near and dear to my heart. He's a leading international authority on immigration issues and foster families, a proud Navy veteran. Richard has been featured on CNN International, Univision, AP News, ABC TV, Costco Connections, Washington Post, and EFE, the world's largest Spanish language media company. He is a columnist with Foster Focus magazine and an international speaker. He was honored as the California Hero. He has been also translated for the United Nations, and for 25 years, his nonprofit has worked with government agencies across the country to unite immigrant and foster children with their families. I can't thank you enough, Richard, for the work you do. It brings me to my knees, and I'll tell you that, and I can't wait for our audience to hear your story.
Well, thank you very much, Art, and it's certainly a pleasure to be here. For you and others who are listening, let me kind of paint a picture for you. Veronica is 15 years old. She's living with her father. Just like any other teenager, she's thinking about the weekend, junior year. Her whole life just changed. Her father gets sent to prison, and she goes into foster care. Now, agencies take time. They look for relatives. They can only find one. It's an uncle, but he died 3 years ago. Now, when she ages out at 18, that means when the foster care system forces her out, her likelihood is that she'll become homeless. She'll probably turn to crime for money for food and a place to live. But she could end up in prison, or she could become a sex trafficking victim in as little as 6 hours. That's her possible future and probable future. Now, adoption, she has a less than 1% chance of being adopted. Her real only hope is if someone could find her mother, but her mother moved outside the U.S. So desperate, the agency contacted my nonprofit. We went into action. 3 weeks later, we found her mother. Her mother let us know about 2 aunts that were living in Houston, and that's where Veronica is now living. She's in Houston, back in school, thinking about things that most teenagers should be thinking about. Her life is back on track, and she's with people who love her. That's the work that I do.
God bless you. I mean, because that is in itself, when you save just one life, but I know you've saved a lot more than just Veronica. And that is what is so impressive about what you do. And so selfless. You're selfless.
Well, thank you, Art. Been doing it for 25 years. I probably don't sound it. But let me take you back into how did I get into this? I get asked that a lot. So I got out of the military. I was in the Navy. And I decided to go into international business. And I spent a number of years there. I was very lucky to have a very powerful mentor. His name was Antoine Morrison. He had been all over the world. And one day he comes to my desk and he has a piece of paper and he says, I need you to find Barry. I don't know his last name, maybe Johnson. He said he works at the Department of Commerce. Now, the Department of Commerce is a huge organization. And Barry also worked in Washington, D.C. That's all Antoine had. He said, do your best, see what you can find. Now, this is pre-Google. And for anyone listening, that means no search engines. It's all paper. So later I drop off the piece of paper on his desk and he says, what's this? I said, that's the phone number for Barry. And he looks at his watch. He said, well, I asked you for this information 5 minutes ago. I said, well, I'm sorry. I tried to be fast. He said, no, you don't get it. It was just 5 minutes. And I said, well, yeah. And I'm ready to leave. Job done. And he's like, no, you come back here and explain, how did you do this? And I said, well, I called Suzanne at the Economic Development Center. She directed me to John. I talked to John for a minute, and he got me over to, Kate, and Kate gave me the number. And I'm still ready to leave because job done. And he's like, you don't get it. Nobody does this. And I'm like, I do. I'm still ready to leave. And he's like, you're not listening to me. And I was lucky enough to have spent enough time around this man that when he said that phrase, it's kind of like when you're called by your full name, you know you're either in trouble or you better pay attention. So I go back to the desk, and now I'm trying to be calm and pay attention. Okay, what am I missing? And he says, reminds me of his background. And this man had worked in Europe, Latin America, and who's who. He'd worked for the DOD. He'd worked for foreign governments. And he says, you know my background? I'm like, yes. And he says, then when I say I've never met someone who can do what you just did, that's special. And if he had not pointed that out, I told him, I do it all the time. He says, that's the problem. You do it all the time. Nobody else does this. And that was one of two very important conversations I had that made me realize that I had this gift of taking information that some people look at and don't see anything, or people look at and don't put the pieces together, and I put the pieces together. And fast forward to about 13 years ago, I get a call. I'm helping foster children, but I'm doing other things. I get this call from a gentleman. He says, I've been following your career. Been following it for years. Love your work. Helping a lot of kids. We need to talk. And his name is Kevin Campbell, and he goes on to explain that he created this idea that when kids go into foster care, agencies should find their relatives, and not just one relative, a lot of relatives. So by the time you get 10, 20, 40 relatives, somebody probably will put their hand up and say, I'll take the child, I'll take my nephew or my grandchild and get them out of the system. He said, here's a problem. If the relatives don't live in the U.S. anymore, nobody's looking for them. Or if they are, they're not very good at it, but you are. And we need someone like you to help those children. And Art, you mentioned Veronica. There are 90,000 Veronicas who have this problem that a relative or a bunch of relatives are not living in the U.S. And those are the people that I help.
Wow, that's truly amazing.
The need to have closure in any given situation is sheer human nature. And when it comes to romantic relationships, this desire skyrockets. Has your previously failed relationship left you in immense pain? It's not uncommon for people to shy away from a new relationship after their first one fails miserably. The fear of the unknown makes them hide in a shell to prevent any future heartbreak. Relatable? Despite wanting to love and be loved, you can't take the plunge if your mind and heart are still locked somewhere in the past. Maybe you aren't aware of the power of releasing the past, or perhaps you don't know how to do it. Art Costello in his online course teaches the art of moving on from bad places to happier, more stable ones. This course can change your life for good, helping you beat all kinds of negativity on the road to eternal bliss. Sign up now before the gloominess gets the better of you at expectationacademy.com.
Can you kind of tell us how the process works? Who requests your help? I mean, the kids can't do it. It's got to be the agency, right, that reaches out to you. How does that work?
So again, when a child comes into the foster care system, the agency immediately starts to talk to the child, find out all the information about their relatives, and they may have only one parent like Veronica did living with them. And they try to get as much information as possible, and then they go to the databases. There's some huge databases in the U.S., and they try to look for the aunts and uncles and grandparents. If they hit a block or struggle to figure out what to do next, then a lot of those agencies will contract a third-party nonprofit like ours. And so we get contacted from all over the country, Pennsylvania, Florida, Texas, California, and counties will call us up and say, I've got 2 this week. I've got a child, they're in foster care. Mother's living or the father's living outside the U.S. and Mexico. And I say Mexico because we get a lot of those just because we're next to Mexico in Canada. So that's how we get these cases. They come in from all over when they need that extra help.
How do you find somebody in Mexico? Because, I've been to Mexico. I've traveled through it. I know that some areas, you're lucky if you could find a phone, no less, any other way to find and research somebody. How do you do that?
Well, you're right. And I have been in some of those towns where there's only one phone because the cell service is so poor, or Sprint or AT&T decided it wasn't worth their time to have satellite service or phone service. So you're right. There's only one phone booth, and that's what everyone uses. The answer, though, it's more than one solution. It can be working with the federal government, the state government, local entities, other nonprofits. It really depends upon, and we also, after 25 years, we have our own information sources that we've created that help us to do this work. And because of that, we can do it faster than a lot of people. So someone in California might be able to find someone's relatives in Mexico, maybe in Jalisco. That's the name of a state where Guadalajara is, or in Mexico City. But because they don't do it every day, it may take them 4 times longer than we can because we do it day in and day out. So, of course, we're fast, we're quick, and we know who to call, and they know us. So we cut through the red tape. We don't like to work with the embassies and consulates. They're wonderful people, but slow because this is not part of their job description.
They're bureaucracies, and bureaucracies move slow. They just don't move fast. Do you ever get pushback from other governments and our own government? Really, I could see where you could get, that could happen. You could get pushback from people.
The pushback we get is more for inside the U.S. This is a terrible thing, but you probably have the idea when you think foster care that everybody's on board and everybody is pushing 110%. And sadly, that's not true. You have caseworkers who have burnout. And look, for the most part, everyone I've ever worked with in social services have been caring, dedicated people who want to help these children. Sure, there's a few bad apples, but in general, most of them want to. But they are super overworked. And so the pushback we get, maybe they feel that they don't have enough budget, even though what we do is usually pro bono. The short answer for that is free. It doesn't get cheaper than free. But still, we'll get pushback because somebody feels we're stepping on their toes. We might take their job. Someone gets concerned for I don't know, whatever reason, because at the end of the day, it's about the children. It's not about size or publicity. It's about Veronica is back with her relatives, back in school. She's safe, and she's not going to be on the streets at 18. And the other 90,000 children like her that we can work with, that's the job. That's our mission. But yes, we do get people who, for a variety of reasons that we'll never know, decide not to have us help them.
Has anyone ever inspired you to discover a happier, healthier, and more fulfilled you? It is a magical experience, isn't it? Inspiration is indeed very powerful, yet it's often undermined. It can lift you from the ground to the sky in no time. Have you ever thought about returning the favor by inspiring the people around you? If you don't think you have it in you, we have good news for you. Art Costello's online course has everything you need to learn to supercharge yourself and shape your character into a powerful personality. Get ready to discover your strengths and unleash the creativity within. Don't believe it? Check it out yourself by signing up for this life-changing course at expectationacademy.com. That's expectationacademy.com.
I'm going to take you back to 1993 when you started Forever Homes for Foster Kids. 1993, did you ever think that it would progress 20-some years, 5 years later to where it is now?
Absolutely not. And let me tell you, Art, you probably have heard being pulled into something. I mean, there are some people at 16, they wake up and say, I'm going to be an accountant, and I'm going to be the best accountant ever in San Diego. And I love those people because they know exactly what they're going to do for the rest of their life. I was not one of those people. I was good at many things, so I had a terrible time figuring out where I wanted to settle. And in 1993, I was doing international marketing, and I found people, and that helped me, but I wasn't looking to start a career, so definitely not. What happened is I started finding people professionally, and then someone said, could you find a relative? And I found their relative. Then someone else heard about it and asked me if I could find their relative. And then someone wanted me to find a government official to help them out because they had known them in high school. And the next thing I know, I'm getting phone calls from people, and I'm saying, I don't do this. No, you've got the wrong people. I really was not looking to do this initially, in part until Antoine pointed it out to me. And finally, after phone calls like that, I thought, maybe I should do something. I wish I could tell you with some real divine touch or, I heard the word. It wasn't like that.
No epiphany. It just happened slowly. Yeah, I can understand it. In 1966, when I was in Vietnam, we were coming through a village and I ran into a little girl in an orphanage, a Catholic orphanage in this little village we were coming through. And to make a long story short, I helped support her for 2 years after I came home. And in 1968, the Viet Cong, during the Tet Offensive, took over the whole area, and they used the orphanage as a human shield between the Marines and the North Vietnamese. And we think she was lost. I'd like to someday find out. But anyway, I tried to bring Yoon home with me in 1966. She was 9 years old. I was 18. And I was not married. And the Marine Corps said, absolutely not. We're not going to let an 18-year-old, though I would have taken care of her. I was capable, but the red tape, the Marines weren't going to let it happen. And it didn't. And I've always felt bad about that, because I understand part of what the Marines did, but then another part of me is, they didn't know me personally, the people that were making the decisions, and know what my commitment was to her. But these experiences are meant to teach us lessons and help us grow. What lessons have you learned in dealing with these foster kids? There's got to be some tremendous stories and a great deal of satisfaction and all that you experience.
Well, I'd say my first lesson is that you can't let the bad get you down. You cannot. I tell the Veronica story. It tugs on people's heartstrings. It makes them feel a lot. Some people a great deal, but it's because there's hope at the end of the story. There was a solution. There was a resolution. She has this new life. It wasn't her old life, but she has a life and a chance at a better life. And for other people, it's simply, for me, it's that whole idea that I can make a difference. And, you were talking about that little girl, 9 years old. You made a difference for that girl. And maybe, I would say take some comfort in that for the short time you were there, you did what you could. And I think people sell themselves short by understanding that they are there. Sometimes we're in a person's life for just a little bit of time, but it's something that allows that person to have closure or to get over grief or to feel better or to move on. And sometimes I think we discount how powerful we can be in a person's life, even if it's for a few days or a few months. We can make this incredible impact on that person. And that's what I feel like with these foster kids. I mean, they come into my life, in the life of my nonprofit. We work for them. We try everything we can. We're usually successful at getting them into a new life. And for those we can't, I can sleep at night because I know, because they'll be told of the effort we made. And they know someone cared enough to try, someone cared enough to do and to search and to spend time because they were important. And they know that they were important and are important. And that's what I take away when I think of foster kids. It's not the bad stories, and there's plenty of those. It's the hopefulness. It's the idea that there are thousands and thousands of people working to make life better for these children who had a bad situation. It's not their fault. They're in a terrible place, and people are working hard to get them out of it. And it's not perfect, but at least we're doing our best. And hopefully, most of them will know that, and that is enough.
And it is enough. I mean, I've always, and I understood this from personal experience, one sentence can change somebody's life. One simple sentence, because it did mine. Because I had a seventh grade social studies teacher that said the words to me, "Everything's going to be okay. You're okay." That's all he said to me. And it meant the world to me at the time. And it's carried through my entire life with that. Let me ask you this. Have you been able to expand this process across the world?
Great question. We have expanded since then into Central America, the Caribbean. We've done cases in the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, and yes, it is part of the U.S., but it still is a different country. Mm-hmm. Guatemala, Honduras. We are still working our first case in South America. So we do handle Latin America, and we are the only non-governmental, nonprofit that specializes in this. We find lots of relatives in the U.S., but our specialty is that we can also find those relatives when they're outside the U.S. and Latin America. And so, yes, we've expanded, and very honored and thrilled that we can do that work in these other places, for children in foster care.
Do you have a large staff, or do you pretty much do this with a very small staff yourself and some people? I mean, you talked about your talents. Are your talents transferable to other people? Can you teach them how to locate in other countries and stuff?
Yes, I can. And we do training. It is more than just me, fortunately. You just can't do all of this. So we have a network of volunteers, connections with nonprofits that we work with. We have people outside the U.S. that we work with on a regular basis that are invaluable to helping make this happen. But it was setting up that infrastructure, and that's what we have been successful at, is setting up that infrastructure and keeping that history over 25 years, which is one of the things that makes us stand out. Because I got to tell you, with all the burnout that happens in the foster care system, you're lucky to find an office after 5-10 years that has anyone still left. It just doesn't happen. And for those who do, it's rare, but we're lucky. 25 years, and we've got some of the same people have been doing this for, over a decade, almost 2 decades.
Wow, that's amazing. I think it speaks volumes about your organization, which is, by the way, a nonprofit, right?
Correct.
Yeah. It speaks volumes about the work you do, because in order to keep the recidivism rate down, you have to have results. And when people get results or outcomes that are positive and everything, it rejuvenates your workforce. Every time you do it, it would be hard to walk away from it when it's so rewarding versus the frustration that we see in our social service, because it's a whole different way. It's such a bureaucracy, and you cut through that red tape.
Well, we do, and part of that is because of my business background. We look at things a little differently. We look at it with a expansion mentality, that there's more, not less, and that we're not trying to fight over scraps. We don't see our work that way. We see our work as being extremely beneficial. It's beneficial not only to the children, but to the population. I won't go into the numbers, but there are hundreds of thousands of dollars that do get spent on a child who does leave foster care if they don't get taken care of. And so we cut through that. And so it helps everyone. It helps our families. They're stronger. It helps the children because they're with people who love them. It helps the community because the families are stronger. Stronger communities helps everyone. Business, individual, it doesn't matter. Everyone benefits. And so that's the big picture I see when I think about the work we do. It's not simply, but we have the focus that we're helping that one person, that one child gets our 100% of our focus on every case that we work so we can make the best outcome possible for them.
I wish you could take your system and implant it all over not only the country, but the world, because, there's just literally millions of foster kids all over the world, kids that are living on streets that aren't even considered in the foster system. I mean, particularly in South America and Argentina and Brazil and some of those areas. And the gangs are coming in and becoming their families and just creating more havoc in society. Do you ever run into that? I think, what is it called? M12 or M13 or something that is so prevalent down there?
Well, we've been lucky. We don't interact in such a way that we, bump into them. But here's the other side of that, Art. Most of us were thinking this is something that happens outside. And sadly, the truth is, everything you describe happens here in this country. This is how people end up leaving foster care, because they get online and someone sweet talks them and tells them that they'll give them a better life and they'll treat them better. And the next thing you know, you've got 4,000 foster kids who have disappeared in 12 months. Nobody knows where they are because they thought it was better. And one girl wrote me and said, I was getting my butt beat every night by my pimp, but it was better than the home I was living in. Now, something's wrong when someone says that to you. Something is seriously, seriously wrong. And that was here in this country. And so foster care is one of those areas where we need to look homeward first before we try to save the world. We've got to save our own kids, and we've got to make it better for these foster kids. And that's why I appreciate being here today to share some of this and let people know they're not hidden, they're not invisible. They get hurt just as much as any other kid. They want what everyone else wants. They want to be loved and cared for and to have a roof over their head and to get 3 meals a day, which many of them don't. They just want the basics, and we need to do better.
Yeah, I just had this thought in my head when you were speaking about how this is a prime example of why we need a better communication system between hospitals and police departments and local governments and the general population, because we have the eyes and we can see. If you see kids that look homeless and look lost, we need to reach out and help those kids instead of turning our back and saying, the things that people fluff it off. We need to change the thought around in our country and start fixing those issues. We have a big homeless problem here in Austin, and the mayor's working on it. And they've just made it to where the homeless can now set up tents anywhere in the city on the streets. And it's brought the homeless population out of the woods and out of the back areas onto the streets of Austin. And now people are up in arms because they have these camps that are underneath all the overpasses here, and downtown along the street, they've set up camps because they want to be safe. They want to be around where other people are and the light and all that stuff. But now people are up in arms about it because they're bringing trash and drugs and tents onto the street. But we got to figure out how to solve the problem. we've got to figure out how to solve the problem. And it's a huge issue because there's a lot of homeless people. And I know California and LA and San Francisco, I think, or maybe it's Seattle, I'm thinking of, have real big problems with the homeless. So
it's definitely part of it, and it impacts the foster children because as soon as they're out, many of them don't have money. They don't have a place to stay. They're couch surfing, which means they're just going to someone's home for a night or two, and then they're off to someone else's if they're lucky. And all the things that go along with that, of not having a job, not having stability, all those things impact foster kids. And that's why helping them before they get out is the smart way to handle this, not once they're on the street.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that makes perfect sense because, well, I mean, we all know the reasons. I mean, you're better off dealing with them in a structured system than when you have them out on the street. It's just a lot better. But why is it that these kids can't stay in foster care? Is there a lot of different reasons, or what is the major reason, I guess, is what I'm going to ask.
Well, the good news is in half of the states, they've raised the age to 21. So kids can stay in. The other half, it's still 18. And honestly, most child experts, feel that at 18 years old, most of us aren't ready to go. I mean, think about it. Pay our own rent, pay our own utilities, have a job, manage our money. Most people with a family aren't ready for that 18, much less if you've never had a structured environment to learn any of that. So that becomes an issue. But back to your question, I do get this. There has to be a point where you say, I got to let it go. They've got to, stand on their own. However, we need to do a better job while they're with us, while they're in the system, of making sure they get an education. If we have programs so they can go to college for free, letting them know that, how they can apply, helping them to apply, helping them to get in. We have lots of programs around this country that could help these kids and do help lots of foster kids, but there are others who have no idea about all these different programs that could help them, that they could take advantage of. And here's the other side. When they hit 18, Art, there are some kids, they've been moved around so many times. There's a case right now where the children involved are suing the state. They have been moved more than 100 times. Think about that. If you were in the military and you moved around, we're an Army brat, and you moved around 3-4 times a year, that would have been like, wow, these kids moved around 100 times. That's like moving every 2 months.
You talk about have a feeling of not being wanted anywhere. That would definitely give them the feeling of not being wanted anywhere.
Absolutely. And the bad side about that is it's not like the foster parents are calling up and saying, we don't want, Johnny. It's not like that. I mean, it happens, but a lot of cases, the foster parents are saying, why don't you leave him with us? Why can't we keep Veronica? Why can't we keep, this child with us instead of moving him somewhere else? So we have issues that need to be fixed within foster care. But let's get back again to what you were asking. Because of these problems that are not being handled very well, by the time a foster teen gets to 18, a lot of them will say, I don't care if you've got another 3 years of help for me. I'm gone. I'm out of here. They're just so tired of being under the restrictions and the changing rules and being with different families with their different ways of doing things. And these kids don't get a say in the matter. Mm-hmm. And they feel they don't have a say in the matter. And at 18, a lot of them will say, I'm out of here. Thank you, no thank you. And they take off because they feel that they can't get any worse. And that's where we're really failing a lot of foster teens.
Yeah, and you were talking about foster parents, and that brings me to a question that I had that I wanted to ask. We had a rash here of incidences where children were being put into foster care, and they were particularly infants, and I'm saying infants from 6 months to 2 years old, and they were dying because of abuse. And we have in our system here, and I'm hoping they've gotten rid of it because there was so much publicity around the bad situation where we had foster parents that were taking kids who should have never had foster kids they could hardly take care of themselves. And they were taking on 4 and 5 foster kids because they got a stipend from the state, to take care of them. And some of the people were on drugs, and some of them were single moms or single women that had boyfriends that were on the sex offender registry. I mean, just all kinds of issues like that. That's one of the things that we need to fix, particularly here. We don't have foster parents that are willing, who are well qualified, educated, and education. I mean, common sense. We don't have a lot of common sense foster parents, I mean, you just hear of all these incidences in Texas with the problems with the foster parents, and the foster parents almost seem to be the bigger problem than the children.
Well, there's actually 2 answers to that, or 2 comments. First one is that we hear these sensationalized stories, and we do put those out. We have a Facebook page. We do, let people know that these things happen, because if you make it sound like it's cheerful, then everyone's like, oh, they're taken care of. They don't need us. And foster children do need us. They need everyone. So, and like any other system, if you don't talk about what's wrong, you can't fix it, because you've got to put it under the light so that you can address those problems. And unfortunately, the bad stories get a lot more, news and press than thousands of parents who are really dedicated, working hard, trying their best. But here's really the problem with what you just said with the problem itself. We've had foster care in this country for decades. At this point, every county should have a nice, well-organized system for vetting people. So there's no reason for someone to be a single parent and having a lover, a boyfriend, girlfriend coming over, and that has not been cleared and vetted, or that person isn't allowed to do that. Nobody should be able to do this who doesn't pass the process. It goes back again to the counties who either don't have a good process in place, or they're just not following the process. And again, the children suffer because adults are not doing their job. Adults,
And that actually is part of the problem here, because the county doesn't handle it here. It is a state agency that handles that. And they are just now, or over the last 2 or 3 years, overhauling it because the people weren't doing their jobs. They were collecting a paycheck, not even going out in the field and checking on kids. But when we started losing so many little children to beatings and abuse and all that stuff, people got up in arms, and now they're restructuring the whole system. But I actually think that you're right, because local government, county government, is much more equipped because they're not so broad. I mean, in Texas, we have 258 counties. Some of them are huge. Some of them are small. Some of them have very little population. Some of them have massive populations. You get to Houston and Dallas and San Antonio and Austin and El Paso, and you have huge populations around them. But it's still handled at the state level, and it's too much of a bureaucracy, and there's not enough control over the staff. And if it's local, I think county, I'm talking local county, but the way that our finance system and the way that we fund things here, it's got to come through the state, because the local governments don't have the funds to do it. But that's a whole nother issue, whether we should have an income tax. We have no income tax, but we have sales tax. And, sales tax is the main, and property tax are the 2 main things. Property tax goes to school, but sales tax goes to local governments to run things. And if you're in a small county and don't have any industry or retail, you don't get much money. And there lies the problem. So, but that's a whole another story.
Don't know which direction you want your life to take? Are you sinking deep down into the pit of uncertainties day by day? So, what's the secret to leading a happy, satisfied life? It's taking matters into your own hands. But what if the matters in question are a total blur? Art Costello's Expectation Academy course aims to tell you exactly how you can get some clarity in your life. This course can be your savior on your journey to reinventing yourself. While you certainly can't plan your whole future ahead, you can definitely control twists and turns your life takes. So what are you waiting for? Sign up for this course now at expectationacademy.com. Get a chance to broaden your horizons and add meaning to your life. That's expectationacademy.com.
I know that you do a lot of work with immigrant children.
Correct. And that's going to get more and more mainstream because I'm sure everyone has heard about what's happened at the border. They've seen the news stories. What people aren't talking about is the fact that these children are now in the population. They've passed through. They're here while they're waiting for their hearings. And that means they're staying with someone, an aunt, an uncle, grandparents. So now they're here, living in Austin and Houston. We'll talk about Texas or Dallas. The thing is that most likely those relatives aren't very rich. Most likely they might be lower middle income. And unfortunately, when it comes to foster care, the children that seem to make up the vast majority of the children in foster care come from lower income families. So you've got this perfect storm of a lot of children coming in. They're coming into families who have very modest means, which means these kids might get picked up for neglect. They might get picked up for some kind of abuse, physical or sexual. And at that point, now they're in the foster care system. And now, because of what we mentioned earlier, the foster care agencies are mandated by law to go look for relatives. Now they got to look for those relatives who are living in Guatemala, Honduras, other places in Central America. And we have people who are not trained to do this. They don't have the resources. And like you just said, they might be in a county where they don't have a lot of resources at all. And now they've got these children in addition to the other children. And there are tens of thousands of these children now throughout the U.S. And trust me, and give it a year, 2 years at the most, we're going to start seeing more and more of this. We've already gotten calls from counties saying, I have a child, she's an immigrant, and we don't know how to start the search to find her relatives. We don't know what to do. That's not what we're trained for. And so we've got a situation that's already brewing and growing. So it's not job done. We're a long way from that.
Let's talk about the really important issue, money. Can you get grants for the work you do? Is it possible to get grants, or is it just too much red tape for you to do that?
Well, if someone, sent me an email or called us and said, we have the perfect grant for you, we would jump all over it. But just like anything, it does take time. And so we're actually focused more on corporate sponsors, especially those corporations who their product or their service is towards families or children, and they want to, keep in touch with that demographic, or could be corporations who, would like to, show their social good works and would like to partner with a nonprofit like ours. So where we're leading right now, and we have a Facebook page. Someone goes to Facebook and they start typing in Forever Homes for Foster Kids, it'll pull up. And we have 2 or 3 donation buttons there. They can donate on a post. They can donate on the Facebook page. They can go to our website. There's a big photo with a donate button on it. We try to make it as easy as possible for people to give and to help, because, yes, the work we do is pro bono. It's free. And because it's free, that means we can only do as much as we get funding for. And so, the more that people donate, the more that they can be part of the solution, that they can join us in knowing that maybe they can't foster, maybe they're not in a position to adopt, but they can still help a foster child by donating and letting us take their donations and use it to help a foster child and reunite that child with their family.
If anybody in my audience Anybody in my audience has connections to a corporation that cares about the future of children around the world, get a hold of Richard. Get a hold of Forever Homes for Foster Kids, and let's set something up to raise some funds for the organization. Richard, have you thought about having somebody volunteer for, because I know that there's people that are very good at fundraising from the corporate stream. I do actually just had a thought. I have somebody who I think would love what you're doing, and she's a super person. I think you would love her. We'll talk about this later. But anybody that can come in and help you raise funds, you just got to be stretched like a rubber band. I mean, you've got to be so overworked and so, I don't know what the word is even, I mean, you're probably performing at your limits some days where you just would cherish and love somebody to come in and take over some of the responsibility.
We would. And again, we do have our team, but we want to grow this, of course. And yes, you're right. That is a way that people who may not be able to do donations, we're always looking for someone who has a skill. It could be in social media. It could be with working with web pages, certainly on the technical side. Someone who's that one person who loves to do fundraisers and raise money doing, bake-offs or something more, technical that I would have no idea about. We love those kind of, people who can bring that kind of energy and creativity, because it's not about me. It's not about the nonprofit. It's all about the children. The more children we can help, it's going to save them from the life that they could potentially have, which again could be terrible, and can give them a better, brighter future. That's what this is all about.
My head is spinning with stuff going on in it, and I always think big. I mean, I think out of the box and into the universe, and and I'm thinking, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, they love helping and growing children. In a lot of ways, they make huge donations of millions of dollars to different organizations. Why can't we go after them? Why can't we make a presentation to them? I think of the Dell Foundation here in Austin, Michael Dell. There's just oodles and oodles of people, and I think they do want to be part of the solution. We just have to figure out how to. See, you got me thinking we got to figure out how to make this happen. So with that being said, I don't want to cut our time short, but we are getting close on time. And I want to give you an opportunity to give the audience the exact addresses and stuff where they can get a hold of you, and how. I know you mentioned Facebook, but there's got to be other places. And then I want you to leave us with some parting thoughts about something you want to leave us with that'll move us to action.
Well, people can reach me by email. It's R as in Richard, and then my last name. It's VILLASANA at foreverhomesforfosterkids.org. But this is an easier email. It's info, INFO, at Forever Homes for Foster Kids. And the 4 is with an FOR, Forever Homes for FOR, fosterkids.org. Same for our website and our Facebook page. Again, put in Forever Homes for Foster Kids. It'll pull it right up. And you can read stories about, what's happening with foster care, the good and the bad, and how people are stepping up every day. We just did a post about, 2 gentlemen who brought in 5 foster kids to keep them together. They're all brothers and sisters. And that's the magic of foster care, is that there are opportunities where something bad has happened that's completely beyond these children. This is not their fault. This is something that they ended up being in foster care. And it's our job as a society and as a community to take care of them, and where people can step up and be a hero to these children and to be part of this. It's not an isolated event. It's a group. It's all of us coming together. And if you're able to help our nonprofit, you're going to be joining with me and with those that we have, so that together we can be making a difference for these children and changing their lives in ways that you'll never be able to imagine. Taking a child in foster care and then they become an actor like Eddie Murphy, or they become an Olympic star like Simone Biles, who is one of our gymnastic champions. She was a former foster child. There are so many foster kids who now have gone on to do amazing things, and you can be part of that in helping these kids. And I don't know what else I could say that could motivate someone other than that.
Well, I don't think you have to say anything, Richard. Your actions speak louder than your words ever would, because you go and do it, and that's the beauty of it. Richard and I met at a conference, and I heard a statistic there, and I want you to repeat it or correct me, one of the two. We can do it either way. But it was that, was I right that 95% of the funds that you raise go to actually helping the children? What was the figure?
The figure is closer to 85. We try to keep it as high as we can. I'd love it to be that high. Yes, it's pretty much just goes to the casework that we do. And some cases are done in a few weeks, and there's a few that we've been working on for months and months. But it's the effort we put out so we can try to do our best for that foster child.
Well, when it comes to nonprofits, we've heard so much press about, the bad ones where, only 10%. I mean, I heard things about Wounded Warrior where like only 15 or 20% goes to the actual helping of the veterans and all that. But, I'm impressed with 85%. That is awesome that you're doing that. Anything that you want to part with more?
I would thank you so very much for allowing me to be here and to talk about this and to give foster children a platform for, you to hear about it and for people to know more about what's happening to them and the struggles that they're going through, and that they're just like anybody else, any other kid who has their heart's desires, who wants to reach for the stars, and they just need a little help. And together we can give them that little help.
Well said. Well said. To the Shower Epiphanies audience, I am going to appeal to you. Help Richard out. Send $5, $10, $20, $100, $1,000, $10,000. And if you got $1 million, send it, because it makes a difference. And he's making a difference in this world. And I'm proud, Richard, that I had the opportunity to meet you and talk to you. And I hope that you and I can do some great things together, because I really want to reach out and help you myself. It's an honor to have you on the show and interview you.
Well, thank you so much, Art, and thank you so much to your audience. It's been my pleasure.
Yep. Okay, audience, you know where you can get a hold of Richard, and you know where you can get a hold of me. Art at expectationtherapy.com, websites expectationtherapy.com. And with that being said, this has been a great show. Again, I'm gonna beg you, help Richard out with some donations. Send him some money. Thank you, everybody. Heather White, can you take us out? Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the show. Drop us your comments and questions with what you want answered on the show. You can subscribe on iTunes and Binge Network. You can also get more information on the website, expectationtherapy.com.